Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. Today, we're going to talk about homosexuality and pro wrestling. This stems out of some things that I've seen on Twitter and throughout the wrestling space. And since it's June, Pride Month, I guess it's time to sort of have this conversation. So this is the comment that sparked this video. And then we're going to go a little bit into it. We're going to we're going to read some quotes from RJ City and from Effie. And then we're going to go into the true history of pro wrestling. So somebody on Twitter, I'm not going to name them, says wrestling, burlesque, and drag are 3 babies from the same mom. They are all art forms based in radical gender performance. And guess what? That is political. Queer culture is very much a part of wrestling. And it always has been. This is, of course, demonstrably false. It is incredibly false, which we will talk about momentarily. There is nothing homosexual at all in the history of pro wrestling. But let's just go into some other people who seem to think that modern and past pro wrestling, or even some fans, are part of the problem. All right, so there is an article called Wrestling Beyond Gender by Eric Shorey. It was released in the Orange Crush magazine. It features interviews from some gay wrestlers and some quote-unquote non-binary wrestlers, etc. And we're going to look at some of these quotes before we go through sort of the history of pro wrestling. So this is just one of the articles here. It says, ironically, the obvious sexual, sadistic, and masochistic overtones of pro wrestling are disavowed by most fans, who often emphasize the storytelling aspects of the art form. In his memoir, Wrestling Reality, the late Chris Kanyon wrote that wrestling for him was never an erotic activity, and that he was able to compartmentalize the arousal that may have been induced by wrestling as to focus on the work. But what does it actually mean for male audiences to enjoy watching other male bodies be beaten? What does it mean to take pleasure in the rhapsodic explosions of violence that define pro wrestling as a form of entertainment? So RJ City, who currently works for AEW, said this: it comes out in aggression, in screaming and reacting. It's all very visceral. It's in the same realm as someone having an orgasm. It's the same kind of explosion, and those sounds are kind of similar. It's a weird sensation, a loss of control. It's pleasure or anger, and either emotion can be addictive. They're the same, structurally. And the toxic masculinity is to mask all that. Wrestling is very physically intimate, and it's always hard for people to look at that square in the eye. So then the author continues, one can't help but think of the famous Barbara Kruger painting, which asserted that, quote, you construct intricate rituals which allow you to touch the skin of other men, because homosexual contact is both desirable and strictly forbidden. The fascist delimitations around gender and sexuality that had existed in wrestling then functioned as a kind of reaction formation against the homoerotic imagery and contact inherent in the sport by itself. By reaction formation, I am referring to the psychoanalytic concept by which a person unconsciously repudiates certain anxiety-producing id impulses, like desires, by becoming an ardent opponent of that desire. Later in the article, another question is asked, but what do heterosexual audiences suddenly find so appealing about these queer characters? Well, and leading up to this question, they're talking about how there are more gay wrestlers and women, etc., that are becoming accepted in wrestling spaces. And Effie responds, well, even the ones that say they're heterosexual, they're not all that straight. It's a stupid answer, but really, I think they see a freedom in me, beyond all the gay stuff. I think it's this. I'm very friendly with people. I talk with people. I listen to people. They can tell I'm fully comfortable with what I am and what I'm doing. I'm very in the zone and a little wild. But there's a freedom where they see me and say, holy shit, I should follow my fucking heart. I'm trying to preach that there is no consequences to any of it. You're worrying about someone else thinks about your gender or your sexuality or how you present yourself or what you're wearing. None of it matters. I'm the one that they see not caring. There's a secret world that I live in that they really want to come to, and they get to do it for a second, and then they have to go back to their lives. Wrestling has always had these kinds of weird people hanging around it. Maybe wrestling was always a place for weird people to express that part of themselves. And then he says this: they're gay. They're all gay. All these fucking wrestling fans. They're all gay. Very interesting. So there's a lot of stuff written here. So Effie continues near the end of the article. He says, quote, the goal is to have the success where you get to work with these homophobes and take all their fucking money. And they might change their minds or fix their hearts. But the fact that they have to book you because there's such a demand for it, it's like, you can say what you want about me, but I made money and I made you money. So shut the fuck up and look at this magic. Unfortunately, it's still a very discriminatory business because it's a business based on what will put asses in seats, and old white people are still in charge of it. So they talk about the big gay brunches, which of course feature dildos and all sorts of other fetishes and things of that nature, which I'm not going to go into right now. But he says, here is near the end of the article. While this premise may have been laughable even a year ago, Effie's story suddenly seems as plausible as any other wrestling plot. No longer is there one message about what a man or a woman or non-binary person can or should be. We now have different characters in different settings presenting different interpretations of gender and sexuality. So if the masculinist meta-narrative of pro wrestling has truly died, then what it has been replaced with is an explosion of smaller narratives. So Eric Shorey, of course, is some liberal arts college graduate, and he's doing what liberal arts college graduates do, which is listen to people who are clearly mentally ill and deciding that he's going to write an article about it. Look, there is something about the gay culture where they do things that's called queering. Basically, they go back in history and they look at something and they try to say, they use your homophobia as a weapon against you, essentially. But they say that, this is secretly gay. So wrestling is secretly gay, and you're all gay for watching it because it's men touching other men. Because, hyper masculinity would be to say two men cannot make contact whatsoever. If you shake a man's hand, well, you just secretly wanted to feel the male touch. It's like, no, not at all, so it's very strange. So I'm going to throw Effie a little bit of bail here because the comments that he made about pro wrestling fans being gay, it was mirrored by Vince Russo of all places, because he didn't like, or he felt uncomfortable with how into the product some people were. This, again, from 2017. This is from his podcast. This is a quote. I'm not going to read it in his exaggerated voice. I want to be serious here. It's not up to me to judge you. I've worked with gay wrestlers. I could care less. With that being said, I'm looking at these kinds of individuals, and I'm looking at reactions to other men. That's what we're talking about here. The way they react to Kevin Owens, the way they react to Sami Zayn, the way they react to Samoa Joe and Finn Balor. Their reactions to other men. I was just watching the Giants game. I'm not whacking myself off when Buster Posey comes to the plate. I'm not taking it out and playing with it. And I love Buster Posey, but I love in a sense that he's on my team and I want them to win. But I don't start chanting "this is awesome" when he steps up to the plate. It's not a normal reaction for men to react to other men in that way. It's not a normal reaction. So I have come to the conclusion that if you're a part of the NXT crowd, the people who were in Orlando, the "this is awesome" crowd, you fall into one of these three categories. It's that simple, bro. You're either A, a homosexual. Okay, you like men. For you to react this way, you have to like men. B, you either know homosexual but have homosexual tendencies. Or C, you're in the closet. It's that simple, bro. Because men do not react to other men that way. It's not a normal function, bro. Bro, I have someone tweet me after I made a tweet that Finn Balor has to hit the gym. Bro, I literally had a guy send me a picture of Finn Balor with his shirt off. Bro, you're probably a homosexual. if you are searching the internet for pictures of Finn Balor without his shirt on and taking the time to send it to me, you fall into one of these categories. Okay. So Vince Russo is the kind of guy that they're talking about in this article, that he somehow, for some reason, feels very insecure that other people like something a lot. I like how he used the sports analogy, because people are very much into sports, far more than they're into wrestling. You know, we've seen entire generations of youth that are, you know, copycatting basketball players like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, building their entire life around guys like Allen Iverson, but nobody ever calls them gay. You know, it's a very weird thing. And this was an interesting reaction at the time, that a lot of people were very negative towards Vince Russo, mainly because if you say that a guy needs to hit the gym and then somebody sends you a picture of him in shape, that's not gay. That's trying to counter your argument that he needs to hit the gym. So if you say that somebody needs to hit the gym and it's not true, what are they supposed to just say? It's not true, or are they not supposed to say anything at all? Because to say anything at all would be that you are in love with Finn Balor and you want to have sex with him, when neither of those things could be true. This is the kind of over-the-top, what they call hyper masculinity or toxic masculinity that they think is within every wrestling fan, especially people of the past, when that's not true. The kind of reaction that Vince Russo is talking about in terms of the athlete that he's a fan of, it's the same kind of reaction that wrestling fans typically have. They're just very excited to see him because they think, especially when they make a big play or something like that, people tend to get very excited. The idea that people are just excited to see somebody, I guess you could maybe move that one towards, there might be something a little bit weird about that. That being said, however, this is 2017 is sort of modern. That's within the last 5 years. Okay. There is a lot that has happened in wrestling within the last 5 to 10 years, 15 to 20 years, actually, that is more leaning towards, the quote unquote acceptance that, the article is discussing. So the Vince Russos of the world, are the kinds of guys that they're talking about here. And I accept that, and I get it, but it's not true. Okay. Vince Russo's not telling the truth. Effie is also not telling the truth, but it shows that, that there's a horseshoe where flaming homosexual in Effie can say something about wrestling fans all being gay. And then Vince Russo can also say it. The difference being is what they want you to get from it. Effie wants you to accept that all wrestling fans are at least a little bit gay, and in order to accept his lifestyle and all this kind of stuff, Vince Russo is using it as almost like a slur, where if you are excited to see a wrestling match, you're excited to see a wrestler, then you're gay. If you are judging a man's physique, if you're taking pictures of a man, you must be gay. If you're searching the internet for pictures of men, even in the context of arguing with somebody else who's making a conversation about somebody's physique, then you must be gay. These sort of things, the homophobia of Vince Russo is to try to question your sexuality, because he doesn't understand why you are so excited about something. Without taking into account, maybe it might be a generational issue. It's also a different venue. People react differently at golf than they do at basketball games. They react differently at football games than they do at soccer games. And people have those different reactions because they have different sports cultures. Wrestling has a different sports culture than the culture of baseball or basketball or other cultures. But that doesn't mean that people are gay. It just means that they interact with the audience on a different level. We've talked about the relationship between the audience and pro wrestling before, that the audience is very much into the individual of pro wrestling. And when you listen to the Vince Russo conversation, you're talking about a guy who plays on a team. That guy can go from one team to another team and you're not going to care about him anymore. But as long as he's playing on your team, you love the guy. Well, in pro wrestling, there are no teams. There's, well, not there's some tribalism in terms of now AEW exists. AEW didn't exist at the time, but now there's teams, you know. I love the guy who plays on my team. I love the Elite because they're on my team, AEW. And then there is people who just love the Elite. There were fans from New Japan. There are fans now. There'll be fans in the future. And if you want to question the sexuality of those people, I think that that's incorrect. I think that people having a devotion to an athlete is part of what a fanatic, which is short for a fan, that's what that is. You know, people buy Michael Jordan jerseys. They buy Allen Iverson shoes. They do all this kind of stuff because they're a fan and they're devoted to that athlete. I do not believe that unless they literally want to have sex with them, they're not sexually attracted to them. Therefore, they are not gay. If you appreciate somebody's work, that does not mean that you are gay for them. It does not mean you want to have sex with them. And that is sort of the ridiculous conception that is at the heart of both of those statements. It is the idea that you appreciate somebody's work, therefore you must love them and be in love with them, when that is not true. You can love a painting and know nothing about the painter. You can love a TV show, don't know nothing about the writer of the TV show. You can love a movie and not know anything about the actors in the movie. The work stands for itself, and people are often attracted to really good work, especially if they're interested in that niche industry or that niche piece of what they're watching. That does not mean that there's a sexual relationship there. Now, for some people, it might be. They might have a crush on a pro wrestler. That's like some of these guys might have a crush on a basketball player or a football player or something like that. You can't speak in 100%. But I can tell you a large percentage of people just appreciate the work. They just appreciate your ability to do something very well. That's what being a fan is. It's short for a fanatic. That's what that is. It has no sexual implications to it at all. So you have the flaming homosexual in Effie and the Christian in Vince Russo both coming to the same conclusion that a lot of wrestling fans are gay because you appreciate the work of another man. Any type of man who appreciates another man has to be gay, which is laughably stupid. It's just laughably dumb. But that's where we are in today's culture. It should be explained how pro wrestling got where it is. But to get where it is, it's a simple sentence. Pro wrestling started out as a legitimate fight. And then it became a work. And then it became theatrics. That's literally all it is. You know, here is a quote from Scott Beekman from A History of Professional Wrestling. He says, quote, "Wrestling is generally acknowledged as one of the two oldest sports known to man. Running races is another." He says, "Accounts of grappling are found in almost all ancient civilizations around the globe. The function of wrestling, however, varied depending on the culture examined. For some people, wrestling represented an autotelic means of celebrating the human form. For others, it was a functional activity for military or religious purposes." So, and this is true. You go back and if you learn about like the martial arts and various societies, wrestling is one of the oldest forms of martial arts. You know, it's close quarters combat. It's grappling. How do you attack somebody if you don't have a weapon? You know, how do you take a guy down if you don't have a weapon? So with this queering thing that these guys are starting to do, it's starting to really ignore the past history of wrestling and what wrestling was originally created for. It was how do I quickly kill my opponent? You know, how do I quickly kill a guy who attacks me? There has to be a way for me to kill him. All right. But that becomes performance. Guys wrestle to see who's the strongest guy, who's the best wrestler, and that sort of thing. And then it morphed from there to the performance art, which we know today. And that comes from legitimate fighters who legitimately had wrestling backgrounds deciding, hey, we could tear each other apart for 2 hours, make no money, and we both walk away with broken limbs, and then we can't fight again for another 6 months. Or we could just agree that I'll lose to you. We'll both get paid. We'll make it look good. And then that's the end. We could do it again in the next town. And we could do it again in the next town. And we could do it again in the next town. So the idea that the feather boa is some kind of this is showing that there's always been queer wrestling and all this kind of stuff. And I even saw some guy say Gorgeous George. You know, he colored his hair and he wore glitter. He called himself the Human Orchid. It's like, yeah, but Gorgeous George was like a regular guy. I'm talking a drinking, smoking guy of the 20s and 30s. He was not in anywhere a geisha dancer or something like that. It just wasn't the case. The reason why you know Gorgeous George is because he was the first one to do the stuff that you guys are talking about. All right. And it was a gimmick. That's what it was. Guys like Adrian Street. Adrian Street used to work in coal mines when he was a kid. He was not some secret gay dude who was bringing queer culture into, Dustin Rhodes, who played Goldust, was not some secretly queer guy who was living out his fantasies through Goldust. That's not what was happening here. That's what a lot of, gay wrestling fans tend to believe. They tend to think this idea that guys were living out some kind of secret fetish through wrestling and wrestlers. But in reality, wrestling has always been a sport. That was generally the idea. That's what was pushed up till the 80s when Vince decided it was a cartoon, where, storylines were soap opera driven and that sort of stuff. Wrestling was always about getting the audience to believe that you were legitimately the best wrestler, the best fighter. And that had an athletic aspect to it. This is why when you learn about like a Vern Gagne or Eddie Graham or a Stu Hart, these guys were legitimate wrestlers who knew how to grapple. They would take people and they would stretch them and pound them and beat the hell out of them because they wanted you to believe that wrestling was real, so that you would believe what you're seeing on TV is real. Therefore, you would believe that wrestlers are really out to fight. It was supposed to be a simulated fight, not a drag performance. There's nothing homosexual about it, unless the idea of two men shaking hands being gay, which we all know is not. Okay? Now, I've often called Effie Ned Flanders with a fetish, and that is absolutely true. He is. The idea that these guys sit around and think about this kind of stuff in this way, that wrestling fans who like sports, okay? Sports typically has not had any sort of homoerotic aspect to it. And I know the old sportsmen, you smack each other on the butt. In football, you got a guy who bends over in front of another guy. It's like, okay, you can go there if you want to, but that's just an attempt to make the audience insecure. That's you attempting to plant insecurity in the audience and then say, but you're secretly gay because we're oiled up and in our underwear and we're touching each other and you're enjoying it. And it's like, well, if I was insecure, I would take that the wrong way, and I would say, no, you're unraveling all of my sexual preferences. Like, no, I don't think about it that way. I think about it the same way I think about a Mike Tyson fight. Mike Tyson is often, maybe not oiled up, but usually had water sprayed all over him. They're in great shape. I don't want to fuck Mike Tyson. I don't want Mike Tyson to fuck me. And it's the same thing when I think about Roman Reigns. The idea that I can appreciate somebody doing something physical that is good and somehow that's gay. No, it's not gay. And the idea that you want people to believe that is a way of saying, if you come to accept the queerness within you, then you can accept my queerness. It's like, well, no, we're not doing that. I would be more apt to accept your queerness if it wasn't so upfront and in our face. I look at it this way. And there was an article, right? There was an article that was floating around. I'm not going to read it, of course. I'm just going to read the headline. And the popularity or the acceptance of gay marriage has declined in recent years. And they were asking a question, a sociological question, like what's happening to the United States where people are less supportive of gay marriage now than they used to be? What happened? And I say, well, if I could tell anybody, if I could explain to people what's going on with the, I guess you could say, quote unquote, increase of homophobia. It's this. Let's put it this way. Let's say you go into a gas station, and outside the gas station, a guy asks you for $1. You go in your wallet, you give him $1. He say, wait. How about 5? And you like, okay, I'll give him 5. Give him a 5. He stops you again, like, wait. How about 10? And now you're like, okay, $10. Oh, maybe you're feeling generous. Maybe you got a good job. You give him the $10 bill. He stops you again. Wait. How about a 20? And you're like, oh, I'm doing a good deed. You give him the 20. He stops you again. Wait. How about a 50? And now you're like, wait a minute. I've given you all this money already. And then they attack you for being against charity. Oh, you don't believe in charity anymore? I thought you were a nice guy. I thought you were a good guy. I thought you cared about people. Now, homosexuality isn't exactly the same thing, but the sentiment is the same. That we've all sort of supported the idea that you shouldn't attack gay people, shouldn't harass them verbally. If they want to get married, some people are okay with that. Some people are kind of like, hey, civil unions, whatever. But generally speaking, leave gay people alone. But then it got to the point where the gays kept asking for stuff. They kept wanting to make this gay. They want to make that gay. They want to turn this into something gay. They want to go into the schools and have pride parades in the schools. And when you say enough's enough, like, no more, all of a sudden you're a homophobe. And that's where we are in American culture right now, where people are kind of like, if I'm a homophobe for saying no pride parades in school, then I'm a homophobe. I don't care anymore. Because a real homophobe back 80 or 70 years ago, you would have told him you were gay. He'd have kicked your ass. All right. But now today, people are just kind of standoffish about you being gay. They kind of like, okay, live and let live. They're not willing to, kick your ass anymore. So now you feel more comfortable saying that all the pro wrestling fans are gay because they all enjoy oiled up men. And like, okay, sure. It's like we were very nice and okay, we're going to let the gay dudes do what they do as long as they were quiet about it. And then we decided they don't need to necessarily be quiet about it anymore. They can be a little bit more open with their sexuality. I mean, nobody cares. To now, because their sexuality is open, it's going to be about your latent homosexuality. And people are kind of like, what? Like, how did I become gay? Because you're gay. That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't work. But it's all about stretching your charity, And I feel like there's a lot of gay wrestling fans who don't realize that they're doing that. And I understand it's the activist class. It's almost always the activists. They really stretch your charity. You're okay with gay wrestlers and some people, even trans wrestlers and stuff like this. But when you start turning that on the audience and telling the audience, well, wrestling's always been gay, people should be like, what the fuck are you talking about? No, it's not. And it never has been. And it probably never will be. As long as there are fans of people who legitimately like athletics, this stuff will never be completely gay. There's going to be some gay shit in it. Absolutely. Because you can't police the fringes. And that's where RJ City and Effie and all those guys have so much fun. They have fun on the fringes where they can make out with wrestlers in the ring and hump each other and all this kind of stuff. Like I said, fetish. And that's the kind of stuff they want to produce. That's fine. But regular Joes like me and the people listening to this, we don't necessarily want that kind of stuff. We don't necessarily like that kind of stuff. There is nothing inherently sexual about pro wrestling. That would be like saying that mixed martial arts is secretly gay, which I know a lot of people have said. If you're an MMA fan and you've read like MMA blogs and, the same kind of stuff coming from these same kind of people, they'll say mixed martial arts is secretly gay. You're touching other male bodies. And it's like, so what? If you hug your son, if you hug your best friend, that's gay? No. If you're trying to compete to see who's better at grabbing an ankle, that's not gay. There's nothing sexual about it. There's nothing like homosexuality is about sexual preference. It's not about two men in close quarters, that's just automatically gay. No, nobody thinks that way. And it's a caricature of masculinity. It's a straw man built by individuals who pretend that they're very confident in their sexuality, but in reality, they're very insecure. It is a version of name calling. Saying that you like oiled up men. That's their version of calling you a cigarette. If you're in England, you know what I mean. That's their version of calling you a slur, calling you a name. Because if I'm the gay man, then what are you if you enjoy what I do? And I'm saying I'm a person that will watch this whether you're gay or not. It's a person who watches this whether you're a woman or not. But it is very off-putting. Now, these magazines and stuff like this is often written for a certain audience. They're written for the audience that already agrees with them, and therefore don't think too much about what they're saying. But as somebody who doesn't, and this is why I read this stuff, is because it's interesting to know how they feel. You have to know how people think about you in particular. So when I read that, I was instantly like, oh, so this guy who does like the most outrageously super gay stuff in the world, thinks that you secretly like this and that you are secretly gay. It's like, no, we're not secretly gay. So let's end on this quote, which I think is very interesting. This is from the Wrestling Beyond Gender article. Seemingly out of nowhere, pro wrestling has become one of the only spaces for men and women who mostly identify as heterosexual to explore other parts of their sexualities in a safe and mostly non-judgmental environment. The humor that has proliferated in the contemporary pro wrestling world mostly treats sexuality as a kind of ridiculous charade and rarely reverts back to the antagonistic and bigoted jokes that once defined the genre. Although cultural attitudes about homosexuality and homoeroticism have certainly become more permissive, there are a few spaces outside of pornography in which stories are told through mostly nude male bodies, and even fewer in which the narrative explicit in these stories is one in which masculinity is not a rigid set of repressive rules, but instead a fluid and ever-changing array of behaviors and ideas. Quite unexpectedly, pro wrestling now exists as a cultural sphere in which people can safely and joyfully play with and explore what masculinity could be if it weren't so inextricably tied to hatred. So that's what they think. They believe that masculinity is tied to hatred, and that if you were to play with them and play with your gender and play with your sexuality and be permissive and submissive, then you're a progressive. And the more progressive, the better, apparently. But it's this idea that they tie masculinity to hatred. And they want to create a safe space for them to do the things that they do. And I say, look, there's plenty of safe spaces because I don't believe in policing other people's behaviors or other people's opinions. So if you want to have Effie's Big Gay Brunch that features dildos and all kinds of other offensive, stereotypical gay stuff, then you do it. But understand, there's never going to be a room full of 50,000 people that are into that kind of thing. There, you may be able to get 200, 300, 500 maybe. Let's say you get 2,000. And that might be significant in a way. But that doesn't equate to everybody being okay with what you do. And that doesn't mean that because you're more successful now than you probably would have been 20 years ago, that the world has changed. The world has indeed changed, however. And the culture is far more permissive. But it's also changing the other way. For the last several years of people really being passive in how you choose to do things, there are other people who are becoming far more active and far more against it. And that is, it's some ways a shame. In other ways, it's a natural reaction. Much like the bum who keeps asking you for money and upping the amount of money that they're asking you for. there's going to be people who have reached their boiling point. And the boiling point was, remember the tweet from the beginning of this video. That tweet was in response to CM Punk holding up a sign about supporting LGBTQ youth. That's the boiling point. That's where a lot of people have stopped and said, you know what? This bum is asking for too much. We've gone beyond live and let live. We've gone beyond let them do their own thing. We've gone beyond that to now we're supposed to trans the youth. Now we're supposed to actively participate in gay culture and not just have it passively thrown in our faces all day. But now we're supposed to actively continue to help procreate homosexuality in the culture. And people are saying, no. If that makes us a homophobe because we're not supporting LGBTQ youth and I think they should go get therapy, I'm talking legitimate therapy, not, that gender affirming crap. I'm talking like real therapy, like legitimately, you probably need to go and have a seat with somebody who really wants to listen to you. Then I'll be a homophobe. I don't care. I don't care about name calling. This guy Effie thinks that all wrestling fans are gay. I'm bulletproof to that kind of stuff. I'm not insecure where you could try to use homophobia as a weapon against me. I know that you're the insecure one. You want me to be all dissociated and, oh no, what am I supposed to do? It's like, no, not true. Nothing that's happening here makes me want to have sex with a man. Nothing here makes me attracted to men. I can just separate what you're doing from the feelings that you want me to feel. No, the answer is no. Your bums are asking for too much. You're stretching my charity. And there's a lot of people who, again, they rant and they rave on these subjects. And I decide not to. I look at these things from an analytical perspective. I look at them from a historical perspective and I say to myself, I get why they feel how they feel, but that doesn't mean that what they feel is legitimate. It doesn't mean what they say is true. And it doesn't mean that I have to acquiesce to what they want. I think that my resistance to this stuff will be seen as being homophobic. And I don't care. That when I attack these people and call them weird names, it's because I'm a homophobe and I'm insecure. It's what I would do anyway. If I would say terrible things about a heterosexual, why wouldn't I say terrible things about a homosexual? Isn't that what you wanted? Didn't you want equality? That's what you asked for when you stopped me the first time. When you stopped me the first time, you said we just want equality. And I just wanted to ignore you, but you wanted to stop me and say, hey, look, we just want equality. And I say, okay, equality is fine. We treat gay people and straight people the same. They're the same under the law anyway, so it is what it is. And then you stopped me again and you said, well, how about we be able to shack up? How about we able to get married? And I said, okay, sure, if that's your thing. But now you're coming into the schools, you're coming into the wrestling space, and you're coming into everything, and you're trying to make everything gay. And I'm like, nah, we're not. You're asking for a 50 when I really don't have one in me. So like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.